All right, Tage, let's move on here to talk about the Washington Commanders against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, we just talked about the Texans. And, I want to ask you, I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. Who would you choose maybe over the next 3 years between the Commanders and the Texans, where they share a little bit of the same story, where you hit a home run on your second overall pick at quarterback, who's not seen as the first overall quarterback to be selected? Of course, have a defensive head coach. Your offensive line is just overperforming. You have young play callers between Kingsbury and Slowick. So kind of just like funny little points that you're looking at kind of similarly. Of course, the Commanders traded and added Marshawn Lattimore at the deadline in a big move. Was that a little bit of a rich trade? I think you're happy to get some of those resources if you're the Saints. Where does your head go first when we're thinking about Commanders or Texans for the next 3 years?
This is a really really good question. I was thinking about it while you were talking about it there, and I do lean Texans just because they have certain like blue chip players at positions that you want them at. Where both these teams kind of have the quarterback figured out. Like that's obviously most important. But for the Texans, Nico Collins is better than Terry McLaurin, so like you have that checkbox there. The Washington's offensive line has played well this year, while the Texans hasn't. But like Laramie Tunzel is another blue chip player that you have on your offensive line. And then like on the defensive side, like you have a bunch of players there that are all like franchise level players that you want to keep. Will Anderson's the obvious one. Stingley is good. Laster has promising early returns, and then Daniel Hunter will be there for the next couple of years. So that's kind of where I lean Texans. But the Commanders, like everything around them is so exciting right now, and they do have a lot of resources to build up their defense. So maybe in a year we'll revisit this. But yeah, right now I just lean Texans.
Yeah, I guess as we're talking about it, maybe I feel like it's not as good of a question because, as you mentioned, like, I mean, Nico Collins, who of course is now in the stats and scheme rafters in terms of being a Hall of Famer just after a few weeks, but the edge rusher spot, that is actually a really, really big deal. Of course, a premium position, and if you can really feel comfortable just kind of creating so much pressure over and over, like that helps obviously with your defense. I think the offensive line is going to be something that continue to monitor because Tage, Washington's offensive line is like overperforming my expectations so much. I really, really love that. And I don't know, you could make an argument that Washington's offense overall, their design might be just a touch more fun than Houston. So something, good to monitor. Of course, we're rooting for all teams here, right? We got the NFL hat on our heads. All right, let's talk about the Commanders offense kind of overall. Of course, they've had a heavy run game in that they get big bodies on the field, and that's been really fun to see for Cliff Kingsbury. Where you look at Arizona, his time in Arizona, sorry, that some of the criticism of like, all right, how many four wide sets are you going to have? Like, you're not able to create different edges of the offense. Where now we're forcing a cornerback kind of more into the run fit, and he uses that to get creative in formations with all those tight ends and like fullback kind of, or at least by position where they're aligned on the field, and it gets Jaden Daniels into positive first read situations pretty often where his first read throw rate is going to be pretty high. I just like don't have a problem with that. It's like, oh, great. Like the offense is setting up these catch the ball, throw them situations. Like I'm just not going to take away from the quarterback in that. And again, I've mentioned it like 3 times because it is really the biggest thing that's stood out to me. Their offensive line has been a huge surprise, and it is such an important thing kind of going forward where when I like look at these offenses for whatever reason, Tage, I think, all right, well, is this sustainable? Because Washington's going to, actually, when I look at the rest of their schedule, they don't have just a ton of tough games. Of course, they're going to play the Eagles twice and our guy Vic Fangio's defense, but like they can be sustainable because of, I think, how their offense is structured between the run game, between, you're hitting your shots kind of on the outside. What are some of the numbers and thoughts you have for the Commanders offense?
Yeah, I mean, just following up on your offensive line point, the Commanders are only allowing a quick pressure on 10% of dropbacks. And so I just shared that the Texans were worst in the league at 25%. So that is a huge percentage point difference between how often you're allowing a quick pressure, which like the Commanders have the lowest rate of that in the league right now, which is like testament to Cliff Kingsbury, getting the ball out quickly sometimes, like the first read throws, like they've done a really good job there. But offensive line is doing a good job most of the time as well. And so that's been really good to see. And it's allowed them to do a lot of things in their drop back game when they're only allowing quick pressures at that rate. Kind of like funny enough, like they happen to be really good even when a quick pressure happens. But obviously, like you just don't want to live in that world, on a bigger sample when that happens. And then the other thing I've really liked from their offense is their personnel diversity. They're putting out multiple tight ends, like you mentioned, like a decent amount of the time, around 30%. They're either in 12 or 13 personnel. And then they'll use two running backs sometimes as well, where they will put out both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Or when Robinson's been injured this year, they've put in McNichols, and they've been really successful on those 40 plays when they put in two running backs. So they've done a good job of mixing all of that up and being effective out of all of them. And then in the pass catcher realm specifically, McLaurin obviously has been great, leads the league in target, or leads the team in target share, high success rate when targeted. Zach Ertz has received the second highest target share, also high success rate when targeted. He doesn't offer you much after the catch, but he does a good job of churning out some successful plays. And then Noah Brown has been kind of like the surprise, where they signed him a couple weeks before the season after the Texans weren't able to keep him, and he's had a 65% success rate when targeted, which is really good. And he's been someone who can really help Jaden Daniels and this offense just work the intermediate area of the field.
Yeah, Noah Brown, New Jersey's very own. I do think he's a player that is like he just falls into the mold of like, all right, everyone's not always like, oh, Noah Brown is who you're thinking about, but I think a player that we can definitely fall in love with a little bit there. I'm glad that you mentioned and you put this on your Twitter, of course. Oh, at Tage FB Analytics on Twitter about just the team's EPA when you're have that kind of quick pressure. That's a really really fun stat where it gives you a little bit of a feel of, well, how many quarterbacks can really create. How positive is it going to be? Of course, it's going to move towards quarterbacks are able to move a little bit in the pocket. Tage, let's talk a little bit here about the Steelers' defense, where their pass rush is just so good. Minka Fitzpatrick is still fantastic. He's playing at such a high level. I do worry maybe a little bit about like the Giants were able to run on them some. You can probably beat these guys outside if you get them into different types of man coverage a little bit. But I mean, the Steelers are still the Steelers. They just keep on finding ways to win games.
Yeah, I mean they are finding ways to win games off of the way that this defense is playing. Sixth in EPA per play allowed. They're both good against the run and the pass. And like, I mean, yeah, they just have like so many players that like always like will step up for them. Obviously you have the two stars in TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. Joey Porter Jr. has continued some of his high end coverage play last year. Especially when targeted. But then they just have like these other pass rushers that can step up. Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig, have been pretty good. Like Deshaun Elliott is a player I've liked for a couple of years just because like I think he's a pretty good tackler. Like Dante Jackson can also play pretty well from time to time. Like there's a lot of players that they can have and deploy in different ways, which is nice. I do think the run defense when it comes to tackling is pretty good. Like using the next gen stats, like rushing yards over expected allowed. They have the second least allowed right now. So they've done a good job of tackling compared to what their run fit was before, but they haven't done a great job of tackling in the pass game. So like the back end, everyone except Deshaun Elliott like hasn't been that good of a tackler. They've allowed the second most yards after catch over expected per next gen stats. So that's something to watch in this game is kind of like how well they're able to tackle right after the run fit occurs versus like after a reception occurs. Can they not allow missed tackles to keep happening?
Yeah, I do think that maybe Steelers have not gotten the best linebacker play. Of course, adding in Patrick Queen there this season. And like, I'm so excited to just watch the Commanders' offensive line against the Steelers' defensive line, where it feels like you probably lean towards the Steelers' defensive line, even though, again, the Commanders' offensive line has been so good. Like, this is just such a massive test, I think. And this specific matchup, Commanders' offense versus Steelers defense, is one of those. All right, what are we going to learn here today? Like, well, really, what are we going to see from, of course, the Steelers keep winning games, as I mentioned, and they're finding themselves in really like the top of the AFC North. Of course, we'll kind of see how that continues through their rest of the schedule, which is a little bit tougher. What are you thinking here? Just a matchup that you like for the Commanders offense against the Steelers defense?
Matchup I really like for the Commanders offense is their short passing game. So like under 5 air yards. Like obviously good way to just get the ball out quickly against this pass rush. Like TJ Watt just like gets like a sack a game. It feels like he's doing the thing again where like he like racks up sacks without high pressure numbers, which like it's just that's just signal at this point. Like he is one of the few players in the NFL that has figured out like kind of like just like choosing his spots to get sacks. Obviously he gets chipped a lot, so like we'll see like kind of if which tight ends they want to put out there to chip block him. But yeah, Commanders get the ball out quickly, and Steelers rank 31st in EPA allowed on those like shorter passes. Like we mentioned, like they've had trouble tackling on the outside, so just like yeah, getting the ball in McLaurin, Noah Brown's hands, like screen passes, quick slants, like stuff like that. Like I think that can be pretty beneficial for the Commanders offense.
And then what about kind of flipped for the other side there for just a matchup that you're liking for the Steelers defense?
Steelers have been really good this year when they've played against like heavier personnels where either a team will have two running backs or two tight ends out on the field. And so that's what I'm watching for in this game is Commanders will probably want to put out that type of personnel grouping onto the field. So like kind of how do they have counter punches to the Steelers because they've destroyed opposing offenses with multiple tight ends or multiple running backs out there this year.
Yeah, the heavy personnel point is very interesting because, as I mentioned, I've enjoyed watching the Commanders sort of be able to do that consistently. Maybe it's you have McLaurin, you're certainly comfortable with Noah Brown on the outside. Of course, that's only two receivers. That's not an 11 personnel set, but I hope that the Commanders are still able to kind of find success there. It might just be like, hey, this is what we do. This is what you do. We're going to go ahead and find out who can do it better. Let's flip over here to the Steelers offense versus the Commanders defense. Of course, the Steelers add Mike Williams, where I mean, how much of that a needle mover is that? I'm not sure. I guess we'll be able to see. It feels like you're pushing into the we're going to run the ball and throw these Russ Moon balls on the outside, and like maybe that feels like their aspirational offense. I feel like maybe you can sustain like if Wilson is actually just going to continue to push the ball on the outside, bump up that A dot, really challenge defenses in that way. I don't know. Maybe you can sustain it. When I look at my list of sustainable offenses, is this number one? Certainly not. I want to see them be able to do it, of course, against the Commanders defense, who they add Marshawn Lattimore. Not 100% sure if Lattimore is going to be playing in this game, but we'll talk about the Commanders defense after. I'm still not like fully in on the Steelers. Again, love Mike Tomlin, love what they're doing on defense. I think maybe I just have to continue to see it where they have a little bit of a tough schedule going forward.
Yeah. I mean, it'll definitely be like really interesting to watch the Steelers the rest of the year. Where, like they kind of always fall into this bucket of like they win games without like having like a super high point differential or super good underlying metrics. So like it's just always like kind of funny to see it play out for the Steelers. But some fun things like for me in this game, like Noah Brown, I think will be fun to watch as usual. Like he's someone again who's surprised me this year. Like fun player to watch on the defensive side. Forgot to mention him when we were talking about like the stars, but like Cam Hayward will probably like get some pressure on Jaden Daniels in this game. I think Daniels has done well, like with interior pressure, like kind of knowing which side of the pocket to move to and trying to escape while keeping his eyes downfield. So that'll be a very fun matchup is like Cam Hayward, interior pressure, like which way does Daniels go? And then like kind of how does that chase down end up occurring or end up finishing?
Going over to the Commanders defense here. Of course, we've talked about just Dan Quinn's styles of defense. He wants to play man coverage. He wants to stunt up front. I do think they've gotten like really high level play from Wagner and Luvu at the linebacker spots inside. I want to see how much they're going to really be able to stunt up front. Are you able to just create a turnover? And I like that style of defense, I think, where we're going to attack you a little bit. We're going to see if we can just get you off one time. Hopefully have that kind of offense continue to move forward. What are you thinking here overall for the Commanders defense?
Yeah, Commanders defense, 25th in EPA per play allowed right now. So nothing super strong, but not as bad as like maybe you would have expected coming into this year. They've created a run funnel for themselves where they've been better against the pass than the run. And so we'll see like kind of how that works. Like their pass rush has been good. Like they can get sacks on the quarterback. Like Dorrance Armstrong is someone who's like stepped up, gotten a decent amount of pressure this year. And then we'll see kind of like what the Marshawn Lattimore trade looks like, where it'll probably be a little bit easier to integrate him in this game because the Commanders play a decent amount of man coverage. He's more of a man coverage corner, and so you can kind of just have him man up on whatever receiver he's going to end up guarding in this game, and it also should help Mike Sanistril, where he can move back inside instead of having to play outside corner where he's a little bit more suited to play.
Yeah, I wonder what Sanderson ends up happening for him if he's gonna fully bump inside. Do they want to end up just like keeping him kind of more comfortable outside? That's going to be a fun one to monitor. Certainly going forward over the weeks where the Commanders really want to have Marshawn Lattimore be just a healthy player. I think that would really, really help them overall. And if you can just like X out one receiver, or you're like, hey, this is how we're going to deal with the matchup. It just opens up a lot of things, whether you're doubling away from it, whether you're, and it can change how you do things inside with your linebackers sort of as well. I think a matchup here that I'm really going to be looking at is just like literally the left side of the Steelers offensive line against the Commanders, obviously defensive tackle and defensive end, where it could be a situation where Pittsburgh is really just able to kind of bowl you over and really able to get yards over and over. What's a matchup here that you're looking forward to for the Steelers offense?
Yeah, matchup for the Steelers offense is Pickens versus man coverage in this game, where George Pickens is really good against man coverage, really good against contested catch situations. And so like we'll see like kind of what this ends up looking like how much Lattimore plays in this game, and if he can help with that, because like if not, Pickens can end up doing really good against man.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one. George Pickens is fun to watch every single week, whether it's like I don't know how he makes some of these catches, and literally he is the reason why I keep on doing the Tage. How do we monitor CPOE? Do we give it to the receiver? Do we give it to the quarterback? Because he's just like magic at it, and it's like, well, if Russ's CPOE is gonna be high at these times, like I'm watching these plays where George Pickens is just being amazing. Like it has to translate a little bit to kind of other spots. What is there anything that you're liking here for the Commanders defense against the Steelers offense?
I think the Commanders defense can do pretty good when they go against play action in this game, where the Steelers rank 18th in EPA per pass. When doing play action, they do a lot of it like that. They actually lead the league in the amount of play action passes that they're running. But the thing that the Commanders defense has been good against this year is they rank 10th in defending play action. So like, Bobby Wagner and the linebackers have like done a pretty good job of not biting on play action as often as other defenses do. So they should do a pretty good job of defending that in this game.